Hey, this is Jeff, and I wanted to take you through exactly how an AR-15 goes together, what the parts are, kind of how it works. And so in this first video, what we'll do is we'll take you through the parts. So obviously what we got in front of us is an AR-15, and it is made up of a few different assemblies that are actually pretty darn simple to understand and actually to assemble. So probably the easiest thing we can actually do is we can break it down into its first two primary assemblies, and leave them just exactly like that for you guys to see. So that part right there is actually the lower assembly. All right, up there is the upper assembly. Pretty darn simple as we break it out. So let's kind of break it down at exactly, at least the way I see the way that gun operates, and it's just much easier to understand it as we go through it. So if you think about it, the upper assembly, which essentially, if you see, it actually has the barrel. You can kind of barely see the barrel because there's a handguard there. And then in this part of the gun, there's actually the bolt carrier group. But essentially, this part of the gun is the part of the gun where the cartridge is going to go in, and the cartridge is going to get fired from, and then the cartridge is going to be ejected from. Okay, the lower part, or the lower assembly, for the most part, is how you're going to control the gun, because this is actually where the trigger is and where the safety is at, and it is where the magazine feeds up through. So the way I think about it is this part's for firing. This part is for, the controlling of the firing. So let's break those two apart here. We'll get the upper out of the way. Let's focus in on the lower itself. So the lower is made up of a few different really easy parts. So this metal part that's right here, this is actually the lower receiver. Okay, and let's flip it over, because one of the most important things I want to point out is that typically on here, in some point in the lower part of the receiver, you're going to see a couple of different things. You're going to typically see who the manufacturer is. This one happens to be Aero Precision. You're going to see what the model number is. This one's their X15. You're going to see what caliber it's set up for. So this one's a multi-caliber. And then you're actually going to see the serial number. So that's what makes this the most important part of the gun. This is the part that actually has the serial number on it, and it is the part that makes the gun, because without this part you can't have the firing assembly inside of it, and therefore the gun doesn't work. So from a purchasing standpoint, this is the one part of the gun that when you buy it brand new, actually has to go through, you have to go through a background check here in the US, and this is the part that will be used for that background check. What that means is that the rest of the parts, trigger assembly, the barrel, the bolt carrier group, anything, all this other stuff, you can actually just go out and buy, right? And there might be some folks that might think that's kind of strange, but the reality is that it all does not work without this one part that you must have a serial number on. So there really isn't any loophole there or anything weird like that. So we won't get into that kind of stuff. So if you are considering building an AR-15, this is going to be the one part that you're going to have to go either buy from a dealer, or you're going to have shipped to someone that can actually do it, a background check and a transfer to you. All right, so let's take you through the rest of the parts. So one of the first parts that you saw me manipulate right off the bat when I took the gun apart was actually these takedown pins. So this essentially connects the lower to the upper. The other parts that we also have here is the trigger assembly. Of course, you're going to notice the very, very classic, the trigger itself, but there's actually two pieces in the middle in there and some springs, and we'll go through that in a different video. There actually is the safety itself, which that is a separate part from the trigger assembly. They do obviously work together, but it is a separate part. There is going to be the magazine release, which is a couple different parts that are right here. It allows us to We have the magazine up here, and the magazine is held in by pressure. If we want to release the magazine, you push that button and that releases that out. You're going to see a bolt release, which I'll kind of go through operation of the gun in a different video. But this actually releases the bolt if it's in a locked rear position forward. Then what you're going to see here is a couple parts that you're going to assume are actually part of the shoulder stock itself. In a lot of guns, the shoulder stock does nothing else other than give you a spot to put your shoulder. On a rifle, but in this case this is actually a working part of the gun because it has a couple different pieces in here that we'll explain a little bit. But so there's actually the stock itself, which is a lot of different kinds you can have out there. There's something called a buffer tube, that's this part. There's actually a nut that goes along with it, you see right here, and then right inside of here there actually is a buffer tube spring. So we get into how the gun works. I'll explain what that does. It's definitely a very important part of the gun. And then on this particular one, there's just one extra. Let me before I even get to that. So on this particular gun, the lower receiver, there actually is a separate trigger guard. You can actually order lower receivers with the trigger guard integral, or you can order them without a trigger guard, and then you can put on your own trigger guard, which I have here. And then you're going to actually have the grip assembly itself, of which there's a lot of different kinds of those. And actually all these kind of different parts, there's a lot of different parts you can order. It's actually mind-boggling how many different parts there are. But so far, everything I've showed you on this, you have to have. There's nothing really here that's an accessory, although there's some different parts that are standard than mil spec. But everything here is required, and then the last part that is completely optional is you'll see here that there is a sling loop. There has to be a plate that goes here, but this particular plate on the buffer tube plate actually is one that actually has a sling, so I guess maybe that's not exactly optional. It's just that it's a slightly different style, just like these takedown pins here are a slightly different style, and so on and so forth. So anyway, so that's the lower itself. Let's move on to the upper. So now we have the upper itself. The upper is made up of a few different things. So that part right there is what's called the upper receiver. Okay, mates with the lower receiver that we showed you over here. You're going to see a hand guard that's here, but underneath that hand guard actually is the barrel itself, is inside of there. So you need to have a barrel, so that is a required part. On the end of the barrel, now here's where you get optional. You'll actually see here that that I actually have a muzzle brake that's on mine. You could have a suppressor that's on here. You also could have just a simple flash hider, right? And you could have nothing. You don't have to have anything on the end of that. So there's some reasons for picking different things. We'll go into that in a different video. Now, you can't see in this particular gun, behind there is actually a what's called a muzzle brake. Oh, I'm sorry. I got distracted there with her talking. Not a muzzle brake. There's actually a gas tube and what's called a gas block, and those are needed for operation of the gun. You're going to see them on all of them. A lot of times they're hidden just like this, but they could actually show up. So from there, the other parts that you're going to have that are actually in the upper receiver part are going to be so the first part we'll show you here. This is actually what's called the charging handle. And it is this part that is right here. You're going to pull that back, and you now saw that the dust cover opened up. This is actually where cartridges are ejected out of the gun when they're spent, and then you're going to actually see the BCG or bolt carrier group. So the bolt carrier group is actually a needed part of the gun as well too. So this part of the gun is actually where the firing pin is actually located at. You can actually see there is the back of the firing pin there. If I push it, if I get in the backwards position, you can actually see the front of the firing pin there. And this is typically purchased as a single part, although it is made up of multiple parts. The bolt carrier. This is I actually don't know the technical term for this. This is actually a gas receiver right here. Here is the bolt face, and then inside of there is actually a firing pin itself, and then there's actually a pin that actually holds it in spot right there. And then, as you saw here, there actually is the charging handle itself. It's a few different styles of these little babies, but this is needed as well, and essentially this mates with the bolt carrier group, and it actually is used to pull back the bolt carrier group. So let's finish up the video really quickly, because you heard I'm going to dinner, by walking you through the actual parts that you would actually order. So let's start with the upper assembly. Okay, so you can actually order this as one whole unit. Kind of boring if you ask me, because if you're going to assemble an AR15, you might as well go through all the steps. So you can order just this, and you can order it in whatever caliber you want. We won't get into calibers in this video, because right at this point all the stuff's exactly the same, no matter what those are. But as I mentioned, so you're going to have a upper receiver. That's this piece of metal right here. The upper receiver can be bought assembled, and so when it's bought assembled, it's actually going to come assembled with that dust cover assembly. Will actually come assembled on it again, which is actually 3 different things. It's also going to have this forward assist button, which is actually used to and sometimes when the bolt does not seat properly, this is used to actually get that bolt seated properly. This is made of 3 different parts. And you can actually order this as just one assembly if you want to. In a lot of cases, it's about a $15–20 difference to order the upper receiver minus those parts and then add them on. But if you want to go through exactly on how to install that stuff, go right ahead. So there's that. Then, like I said, you're going to have the barrel itself. You'll see in an upcoming video when we actually build one of these things that there is a barrel nut that actually attaches the barrel to the receiver. You're going to actually have a gas tube. Okay, and this gas tube is got to be the right size for the length of the barrel that you have. And there's typically 3 different sizes. There's pistol lengths, there's carbine lengths, and then there's rifle lengths. You then have to have a gas block, and the other stuff is then optional from there. So obviously, silly stuff that you can attach to the gun for sighting, like there. Accessories that might be on the handguard, which is a lot of different handguard styles, and we'll go through those in another video. I had mentioned flash hiders, suppressors, muzzle brakes as well. Those are optional. And then essentially when you do buy the barrels, those can come with a gas block on them already, or they can come without the gas block. So essentially, if you think about it, all this stuff you can buy assembled, all ready to go, or you can buy everything stripped away and separated, and so you can customize it to whatever exactly your needs are. So let's set aside the upper, and let's then move back on over to the lower, and let's go through those lower parts if you are considering building one of these and what the heck you'd want. So like I mentioned, you're going to need a lower receiver, right? So that's that block of metal that's right there. Then from here, there's a couple different routes that you could go. I'm going to go through all the parts, and then I'll show you exactly how you can buy them as groups of parts. So one of the first things you obviously are going to want to buy is going to go buy a trigger group. Typically you are going to buy this as a single unit because there's a few different styles and they're kind of tuned to each other. So you're gonna buy those. You're gonna have to go buy a safety. You're gonna go buy a mag release, and technically there's a mag release button. You can buy those separately. You can buy those as a group. There's that bolt release that's up there as well. Then there is the gosh, I hate it when that happens to me. I'm spacing out totally on that one. We'll come back to that in a second. Takedown pins that we talked about earlier. There is going to be the buffer tube with a plate, and then there's going to be a spring, and then there is going to be a whatever the shoulder stock is. You're actually going to go pick from that. So those are the typical parts. Now, like I said, one of the things you can do is you can buy all this stuff. You can buy this as just one whole assembly if you want to. You can just skip all this stuff and it's really boring. You can buy a completely assembled upper, completely separate lower, be done, not know anything about how your gun works. You can buy an assembled lower if you want to, and that'll actually be just this portion right here. And that will actually have all these parts assembled in it as well. And then you have to stick on the buffer tube and the shoulder stock, that stuff. Again, you might as well go the whole following way. Typically, a lot of times you'll see where you can actually buy the buffer tube, the plate, and the spring together. Really no big deal with that. I mean, there are some options you can have here. But if you do buy those as a group, it's really not a big deal. The spring is actually tuned to the length of the barrel you're going to have. So there's different springs based upon pistol, carbine, or rifle. And then these parts that go inside of the lower receiver itself, you can actually buy those as a kit, and you can get a lower parts kit. And so you get all this stuff. You get this, you get that, and then you'll get a lower parts kit, which essentially is everything inside of the hair, the hand grip, the trigger guard assembly, all those different parts. Or you can buy each one of these separately. And that's about it. I think I've gone through every single part really on the gun without actually assembling it for you. So hopefully that was helpful. What we'll do is we'll do some other videos and exactly how the gun works in another video. And I'm going to go to dinner. So thanks very much. See you guys.